Hi, everyone. My name is Arleene Correa Valencia, and I'm super excited to be sharing my work with all of you today, given that we have these really tough and difficult circumstances. I'm really excited that we can use this platform to continue interacting and to continue learning about each other. And so I look forward to meeting with you all on the 23rd. But for now, I'm going to be talking about my work and my practice, and how I've made really the trajectory of my art practice and how I've gotten to the point where I am today. A little bit about myself. I am one of 4 children in a migrant household. We're originally from Arteaga, Michoacán, and we came to the United States in 1997. At the time, I was 3 years old when we arrived here, and I don't know, for some reason, my parents and we ended up settling in Napa, and so I grew up in Napa Valley. And it wasn't until later on in life that I started questioning our social political position, more specifically around the age of 16. You know, where I was in high school, and a lot of my friends were getting their driver's license, and I was excited for that as well. And I was looking forward to becoming an adult and really moving forward with my life. And then there was a moment when I realized that a lot of those things were not possible for someone like myself. And it was then that I found out that, and really not like, 'cause I think I always knew I was undocumented, but I found the real consequences of my political position to be affecting my life. And so being undocumented really took on a physical presence, and it was no longer just this imaginary thing that we knew, that my family and I knew we had to protect. And so in high school, I really not embraced, but had to take on the responsibilities of an undocumented person and realizing what that meant. And I think at the time I was way too young to understand any of this. But anyway, I somehow battled through life and ended up at California College of the Arts, where I finished my BFA in 2018. And I'm currently finishing my master's as well at California College of the Arts. And so, yeah, that's where my schooling happened. And I've always made artwork. I started painting when I was really young. My father was really into painting, and so it was something that we always did as a bonding experience, or whatever you may call it. I don't know. As an undocumented family, we had a lot of limited resources, and so painting and drawing was always something that my family could take part in without having to push the budget. So I'm going to start off by sharing, going back 3 years to 2017, and sharing a little bit about myself and where I was at the time. I was in undergrad, and I would think it was my junior year of undergrad, and I was chosen to do this residency in New York City. It was the first time I was leaving California since getting here in '97, and so I was really excited at the idea of New York, of just like leaving, and not being trapped. By this time, I had received DACA, which is a program that, if any of you know, permits children like myself, or permits people like myself who arrived here as children unwillingly, illegally, to have a work permit and to use that to travel the United States and to work legally. So I had gotten this permit. I got a residency, and I went to New York. I'm going to share my screen now. Here we go. Okay. So I was in New York City, and I was surrounded by amazing artists. We were looking at art all the time. And I was noticing that, at every gallery show that we would go to, it was all these paintings that were celebrating someone else, but not myself. And so I was really and always drawn to the work ethic of my community, of mostly like Mexican, undocumented, brown POCs. And so I wanted to convey that in paper, or to just make sure that that was documented in a way. And so I started making these charcoal and Conte crayon drawings. They're fairly large, on brown paper, because I wanted to make sure that everything here was mostly brown, and that and that it was like these root colors that I just absolutely adore. And so I painted this guy who's peeling a mango. And granted, before this, I was already collecting. I was obsessed with the way that people were vending and making a living. So I was collecting these photographs of people that I saw on the street that I absolutely just was like amazed by. A lot of the times they end up being men, and I'm very, very drawn to the masculine protector energy. And I think that stems back to the relationship between my father and I, and how we view artwork, and how, I'm a painter because of him and because he's taught me a lot. Here's a woman. And so these were like very simple gestural drawings that I was investigating figure and the way that figures are positioned within our society. And so I was really interested, in the figure and what their labor and what they were doing, and in these brown tones. And I remember having a studio visit with now a really good friend of mine, and he was just, he said, "What are you doing? I don't get what you're doing." And he's a white male, and so he was just like, I don't get it. You're not pushing it. You're not pushing the envelope. And I was super angry. I just thought like, oh my God, you don't know me. You don't know who I am. You don't know my position. Like, you're a white male coming to tell me about, how I should be pushing the envelope, but you don't realize the consequences of my position. And so that was something that I was frustrated at, and a comment that like really bothered me, but at the same time forced me to really push forward and to think like, sure, these drawings are great and I like them, and they're beautiful, and they celebrate the figure and their labor, but they're not really doing anything for me. And so now looking back, I appreciate this friend's comment at saying, you're not doing enough. Fast forward, I'm still in New York, and I end up meeting someone who is a writer for Hyperallergic. And they, we were talking about art, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm undocumented and I make artwork. And he was like, what does that look like? And previous to New York City, I had never told people that I was undocumented. There was so much shame. There was so much fear there of sharing my personal political position, because in a way, I was jeopardizing my security and my safety, and not only mine, but my family's as well. And so I meet Seth, who writes for Hyperallergic, and he's really interested in my story. And and we start talking, and he's like, I would love to run a story about you. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, no, absolutely not. Like, how would I publicly tell the world that I'm undocumented? But then I remember this studio visit with this friend who was like, you're not doing anything, like your drawings are cool, but like you're not pushing, you need to do more. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to tell the world, I need to come out. And so I did the article. I told my story from the perspective of a student being in an almost all white privileged institution, and what that felt like and what it looked like for me realistically to be a low income undocumented Mexican woman in an industry that doesn't always welcome and set up a path for us. And so that I only go back this far because I feel like that was that was the biggest turning point in my career, was being able to let go of this weight that I had carried my entire life, of feeling like I needed to hide, of feeling like I needed to protect myself and my family. I let go of that. I made it public. And I remember getting phone calls from people calling and saying, I didn't know you were undocumented. Like, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't we ever talk about this? Like, why did you keep this from me? And it just was like, one, I realized who my friends were, and two, I realized that I shouldn't be ashamed of being in this like social political position, because it's really a structure that is controlled and made up by people larger than myself, that are in nowhere near close to being able to empathize with who I am. And so that article came out. I embraced the title of being undocumented and being vulnerable in that way. And these drawings were the beginning of that journey for me. And so they're always going to hold a special place in my heart, because that's when I feel like I was able to own my story and to say, this is who I am, and I'm not changing that. And so going from there, I left New York, and I ended up getting a short little residency in Aspen at the Anderson Ranch. And so I'm at the Anderson Ranch and I'm taking a workshop by Ana Teresa Fernandez. And I just wanted to show all of you her, oh no, what happened? I wanted to show all of you her paintings because she's an absolute amazing painter. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to work with her and to be able to do this workshop with her. But previous to meeting Ana Teresa, I was doing these, well, actually, this is the first one. This middle one, this one was actually made at the end and started at the Anderson Ranch with Ana Teresa. And previous to that, I showed all of you my like really brown, earthy tone drawings. And so that's what I was focusing on. I came to the Anderson Ranch thinking I'm still holding on to this color palette. And this is what I want to do. I want to paint the people that are harvesting the grapes. I want to be more connected to my story. I want to talk about the Napa Valley. I want to talk about wine industry and labor. And that's what I'm going to jump into. So I come to the Anderson Ranch and Ana Teresa says, no, like those colors are great. I love the browns, love the earth tones, but you need to put in some blues and greens and like bright colors. And I just thought like my head exploded. I was like, no, absolutely not. But through the week, she somehow convinced me, and she was putting down greens in my palette and like greens on my painting, and I just was about to explode. But it was really like the beginning of my understanding of color theory and my understanding and relationship with color and how that can brighten things up. And so this was such a beautiful place for me to start coming back to California, and to get back into painting. And these are oil paintings. And so this was actually from one of the sketches that I showed earlier, one of the drawings. And I'm starting to incorporate these reds and these yellows. And for me, there was really more of a celebratory space there where it became more surreal. It became more emotionally connected. And I always, for the majority of the time, I prefer to paint and draw and illustrate men, again because of my connection with my father and honoring our history and our whatever. So this one is one that I'm very attached to. So I come back and I'm graduating from undergrad, and I began this painting, and I was actually living in the East Bay, and I had a tiny apartment, and I began this painting at 60 by 48 inches. So it's pretty large. I'm 4'11", so my paintings are usually bigger than myself. And I was throwing in all sorts of colors, these purples, these blues, oranges, and really like being able to connect back with my history while acknowledging this contemporary figure that I wanted the world to see, that I wanted the world to be more connected to. And so this felt really great to me. It's still one of my favorite paintings that I've ever made. It's actually up on view right now at Vessel Gallery in Oakland, and I absolutely love this painting, but I still felt like, oh my gosh, I need to push forward. And so going from there, then I came back home, and now I was leaving undergrad and thinking about grad school. And in that process, it was the 2000, what was that? 2017, 2018. What? No, that was, I'm right, really off on my timeline. But anyway, I come back and the fires happen in Napa, and the Northern California fires start to take place. And so I come back with what felt like all of these tools, right? Like I'm owning my story. I've got some colors that I'm exploring. I know exactly what I want to do. I know exactly who I am. I'm not apologizing for my social political position. And I'm going to use that as my tool to tell our story, to tell a collective narrative, and to honor that and to be really proud of it. And so at the same time, these fires are happening, and I'm home with my family, and I'm realizing that everyone in the valley who has the funds for it is leaving because they don't want to be a part of the crises. They don't want to see, the effects of it, and they have the means to be able to escape times that are uncomfortable. But at this, and so while I have friends that were doing that, and then while I know people that were just like, flying out elsewhere to get better air quality, I also knew that like my other family members and people, my other community was forced to continue harvest because everybody wanted to be able to save the crops. And so it felt really unfair. It really felt like a weight, like the rich privileged people get to escape and not inhale the smoke while undocumented laborers are here trying to make the most of the times that they can to get to be able to feed their families. And that for me felt absolutely horrible. I remember going out and photographing people and saying, okay, years from now, the media we'll look back on the media that was covered during this time, and we'll be able to see all the wineries that burnt and the Silverado Country Club, and we'll have that documented, but nobody is documenting the way that my people are continuing to work and the way that they are ultimately sacrificing themselves during these times of crises for the wine industry. And so I was so angry about that. And I just thought, okay, then if nobody's going to do it, I have to do it. So I went out and I'll share with you all the photographs from those times. And here is this one. And so I was out at night, and these photographs are of the people out in I think that was the Carneros region. And so I'm out there at night photographing people, and I come back to my studio and I'm like, I have to make these large scale, beautiful paintings using a lot of color, documenting this time, documenting these fires and documenting this labor, because I honor that. I think it's beautiful. I'm proud of that. And I want these people to see themselves reflected in something larger than just a bottle of wine. And so I begun this series, and it's a series of about 8 paintings, and they're all 48 by 60 oil paintings on canvas, stretched. And you guys saw the photograph, and so I was translating the photograph, but instead of doing it in a way that like automatically translates the photograph to be photorealistic, I just wanted to honor the temperature of that time and what it felt like to be there. I wanted to have the reds of the fire, the heat. I wanted to have that like be the foreground of where in the environment that these people were in. And so I really focused on that. I really focused on capturing their hands and their labor, and in this time doing it in a way that respects them, respects their privacy as well, but honors them. I see them as relics, in the same way that we honor certain religious figures, or certain historical gods and goddesses. Like I think of these people, and I think of my parents as the ultimate sacrifice for our society, the people who keep us running. And so I felt like after New York, I really knew what I was doing, and I was so excited, and I was making this work, and I was having such a blast. I was also collecting grapes from different places around the valley and putting them in jars, which I still have. And it's crazy to see the way that some have broken down and others have maintained their sorry about that. The others have maintained their just their shape and form. And it goes to show how many pesticides and how many things are used in this position that people are exposed to. And I think that putting that next to the paintings is really important for me, because it really gives you the full story of what they're doing and what they're touching, what they're involved with. And I really love and adore this series for that. Moving forward, I had a studio visit with Ana Teresa Fernandez again, and she just said to me, oh my gosh, you keep using this reflective jacket, this reflective vest. It appears in all of your paintings. It's in everything. It's in, everyone has one. And I was hearing that from several friends that were saying, you're using the reflective jacket. Like, why don't you explore that some more? Go in all the way. And so I actually got a few reflective jackets, and I started cutting them up. And in this painting, it was my first attempt at at merging painting and the physical found object together. And so I put in the zipper right here, and I put in the reflective stripes from the vest into this painting. And I thought that was, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was successful, and it pushed the painting beyond just the painting. And so I was really happy about that. But I still felt like, oh, there's more that I can explore here. How do I get to more? So I ended up getting a lot of vests and cutting them up and doing different things with them, and ultimately landed on stretching them and embroidering them with my family members' names on them. And so Armando is my father, Felipe and Carlos are my uncles. And so I was creating these paintings with these found vests, not jackets, and I was personalizing them by bringing them back to the men that I honor, the men that have made this transition for our family, and that continue to feed us. And so I thought that was really, it was moving, things were, I was like, okay, here's this vest. I like it, but it still felt like we were nowhere close. I was like, this is good, but I don't know that this is what I'm happy with, that this is the ultimate place that I want to land at. And so I made these. They went to a gallery in New York, and I actually ended up seeing shots of them. And I wanted to share a shot of, oh, here it is. Of I was combining the En Tiempos de Crisis, in times of crises, paintings from the fires with the embroidered vest. And it just felt really good to me. It felt like, here's a painted vest and a person, and then here's the actual thing. And so there was a conversation there that was happening that I was really excited about. And I saw them in installation shots in New York and in San Francisco. And I loved them, but I was still uneasy and felt like, oh, there's something more that I should be exploring here. And so I ended up getting even more vests, and they were laying around in my studio for a really long time. And I kept getting people that were telling me like, oh, you need to push this, there's something here. And so one thing that I'll advise is that studio visits are great, and I love having critiques, because even if I don't agree with them the majority, or if I don't agree with the commentary the majority of the time, there's one or two things that will be said that will linger in my head. And even if I don't understand them in the moment, months or years later, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, I understood what my friend Duke was talking about in New York when he said, these drawings are great, but you are not doing enough. Like, put yourself out there, do more, push the envelope. And at the time I was like, this guy doesn't know who I am. He doesn't understand. But now I get it. And so whether we agree with the commentary and studio visits or not, they're extremely important in pushing our work forward. So I left these on pause, and I continued making paintings. And about the fires, I was pushing that series even more. And then out of, I don't know where, Ana Teresa Fernandez comes back into my studio, and she says, hey, I'm doing this project. Well, actually, I should go back a little bit. So in making work about being undocumented and in being involved in the art world, I have noticed, and I have been noticing for a long time, that this theme of undocumentedness is extremely popular. And it's popular in the sense that everyone wants to talk about it. It's so contemporary, and it's so important to discuss these issues, not only about our country, but like in a larger spectrum, what we're going through as humans, and how everything is affected essentially by everything else. And that makes no sense. I understand, but sorry, I'll explain. And so we think about the politics in the US and how they affect other countries, and in turn also affect global warming, causing the movement of people. And so whether people migrate from, A to B because of politics or because of the environment, there's always been a migration of people, but it's nonetheless informed by the domino effect of social political events that occur. And so I understand that this conversation is extremely important and everyone wants to take part in it. But at the same time, I feel like there is a lack of experience. And what I mean by experience is like there's a lack of authenticity in a lot of the work that we're seeing. Excuse me. And so I was looking at artists. For one instance, I was in New York City at the Whitney Biennial, and I walk into the biennial and I see this wonderful, really large painting of a brown man. And before reading the label, I said, I know that man. I know who's standing in front of me. I know who that is. But I know that that man was not painted by someone like myself. That man was painted by someone who thinks that they can tell that person's story. And sure enough, I walk up to the label, I look at the artist, I won't name names, but I look at the artist and I look up the artist, and of course it's a white male. And I suddenly am like just red with fury, thinking about why does a white male need to step in and tell the story of my father? Why does a white male need to step in and tell my story? That's not fair. And you're looking at all of the media, all of the news, the articles, the everything on, ArtNet and like all these art articles and whatnot. And there's artists that are saying, I'm speaking for the voiceless. I'm speaking for the undocumented. I'm speaking for the people hiding in the shadows. And I was infuriated by that. I thought, no, we do not need to be spoken for. I have a voice. My father has a voice. My mother has a voice. We are not invisible. We are visible. And not only are we visible, but people like myself and other undocumented artists, we are making work about this and nobody is listening. So anyway, I'm very passionate about this, but I go on my Instagram and I like blast off with anger, and I'm just like, you can't speak for us. I have a voice. I am visible. Thank you for wanting to make work about immigrants and, Mexican immigrants in the United States, but we don't need you to speak for us, is essentially what I said. And so going back, Ana Teresa saw this post and she said she felt extremely influenced and just felt like there was a conversation to be had there. And so she comes to me and says, I want to make you a sweatshirt with whatever statement you want on it. And so I said, perfect. She says, bring me a sweatshirt and I'll embroider it for you. Sort of in the same way that I was embroidering these vests. And so I'm thinking, I'm working with the vest. Obviously I really care about the visibility of these colors. So I want whatever sweatshirt Ana Teresa makes me to be in the same color palette, in the same vibrancy, in the same visibility. And so I bring the sweatshirt to Ana Teresa Fernandez and I say, she says, what do you want your sweatshirt to say? And my sweatshirt says, we are not invisible, somos visibles. And I thought that was extremely appropriate given that I was trying to express that I am visible and I don't need anyone to speak for me. So together we created these sweatshirts, and they're high visibility sweatshirts with reflective lettering. So I can show you an image. And they have these high vis tapes going down. And they mimic the same wardrobe that people in the construction industry wear. And so if you wear the sweatshirt at night, the letters are reflective and they shine. And so this was such a beautiful collaboration that happened organically. I think Ana Teresa informs a lot of my work already, but it was really great to be able to create something with her that we were both proud of and that we both believed in, and that we both, stood up for and felt was important to showcase to people. And so this is my brother and I in New York City, and we're wearing these sweatshirts. And so this was sometime last year in November, and it was just such a powerful statement to be able to have these sweatshirts. So Ana Teresa then gets asked to create a project for the census for this year. And going back to what I said about, you know, whose voices get heard, she was extremely generous and brought me on on her project with YBCA. And so we were able to get sponsorship through Levi's to create these sweatshirts and to put them out to the public. Um, only if they filled out the census. That was actually scheduled for April for this month. And so what we were going to do was take iPads and, you know, all the census information out in public, while also providing you these sweatshirts and the ability to iron on your own letters in whatever format or order one desired. And so we were really excited about the possibility of bringing these sweatshirts forward to the public, and also highlighting the importance of the census and the visibility in the census. And so this is why this project worked perfectly for that, was because not only are the sweatshirts extremely visible, but there's also a social political stance that's being taken by making sure that you are counted in the 2020 census, and by making sure that you are receiving the funding that you deserve for your county from the government. And so if any of you are interested, by filling out the census, every person in the household receives $18,000 to $20,000 during a 10-year span for a social program or public programming, healthcare, education, parks and recreation. Like everything that you can think of that needs maintenance is paid for and sponsored by the census funding. And so a lot of the times, communities of color are underrepresented in the census, which then in turn means that their communities lack the resources to be able to provide for the people. And so that's why this year there's a huge push to making sure that POCs are counted in the census, and that we are taking part so that we also get a part of the resources that we need. For me, it was extremely important to be involved and to be seen, and to make sure that my community also feels reflected in everything that they do. And one of the greatest things that I learned about this project was that we are protected by Title 13, which doesn't allow the Census Bureau to give out any of our information. And so if any of our information is given out to, not that it would, and I would hope and beg that it doesn't, for the immigration services or anything like that, we could essentially sue them. But another amazing thing is that you don't have to have a street address to be able to fill out the census. And so now we've been able to navigate all these different ways to be counted for without feeling that same sense of fear that we did the last time that the census came around, which was 10 years ago. And my parents were extremely proud to fill out the census. They were extremely happy that I was involved in this project. And so while being involved in this project, and while also being in this shelter at home, I was really inspired, and this is what I'm actually working on right now. I was really inspired by the little pieces of vests that were laying around in my home, and I was thinking about how to incorporate those into figure paintings, because that's really what I'm interested in, is the figure and how the figure functions not only in a painting but in society, and how that's translated both ways. And so thinking about brown undocumented bodies and how they exist social politically, I wanted to make something that used this high visibility textile, but also composed a figure. And so I landed, and this was actually the very first one I created. I landed on these I call them figure paintings, of bodies in movement that are carrying children. And so going back to my own story, I was thinking about migration as a very physical thing. And I recently had a niece who was born, I think, less than a year ago. She's 7 months. And so thinking about the innocence of a child and the movement of a child, and the movement of a parent, and so the relationship between parent and child has been very poignant to me right now. It's been very important in thinking about my relationship with my niece, and reflecting on my migration as a child, and thinking about her and essentially me being in that position of being moved from one place to another. And so, and then also thinking about the high vis vest and what these colors, this neon yellow and neon orange, have done for me, and how they've appeared throughout my work in different ways. So I wanted to make something, again, that had this parental figure, but also had this innocent child. And I guess I'm making self-portraits of my own migration through other people, and thinking about the way that my parents brought me here. And I just in my head started thinking, like, how did they carry me? How did that look like? What were they wearing? What were their hand movements? You know. So um, I'm imagining my dad or my mom sitting with a small child and thinking about the ultimate sacrifice of migrating them from one place to another, and that child being invisible because it blends in with the background. And I think that's where the sense of innocence comes in for me. And the visibility is truly just centered on the parental figure. Um, and removes the child from the position, removes the child from authority, and really doesn't give the child an option of whether it wants to exist or not. It just exists by default, by the delineation of the parent. And so I hope that makes sense when I'm talking about my own story, thinking about how I had no authority in coming here. I had no say. It was a map that was already laid out for me by my parents, and it's one that I'm extremely grateful for. And I hope that these works are able to honor that moment in which they had to contemplate whether they would be able to make the journey or not. And as we know, a lot of parents don't make it over, and unfortunately a lot of people die, and a lot of people don't make it. And as someone who did make it, I get really emotional thinking about this, but as someone who did make it, I feel a lot of guilt in thinking about, like, what are the chances of me making it here? How did I make it here? What did I make it here? And how am I making sure that, as someone who did make it, I'm representing this experience truthfully, honestly, and honoring that as well. And so I've been making these like crazy. These are 11 by 15 on paper. And so I start off by cutting out the figures and collaging them together, and then using embroidery to really delineate the lines. And so I'll zoom in a little bit, and here you can see the way that I'm stitching together things. And this is actually one of my niece and I. And so I think about the relationship of myself to this child and thinking, like, oh my gosh, I could never take this child anywhere. I would never jeopardize its life, its future. I would never want to know whether we're going to be able to sink or swim. But my parents did that. And my parents, they were forced to, and they knew that it was either this or it was nothing. And so these works for me honor that experience. They translate that for me, while also making it wider, more open, so that people can connect to them, because obviously we all see different things. We see the figure very differently, but we can all connect to the relationship between a child and a parent, or we can all connect to holding a child and what that's like. And so while I feel like right now my work is a little bit more abstracted than what I showed you all in the beginning, I think it's more successfully translating my story while also not being too forwardly, not too forwardly political, but like it's not pushing an agenda on you. It's allowing you to bring forward whatever notions of migration or visibility and invisibility you may have, and allowing you to connect on whatever platform you choose to, without saying, I'm forcing you to look at an undocumented brown worker, feel guilt, right? This is more like, I'm letting you in to my history of migration, and you can comment and connect to it in whatever way that might be. So this is this body of work. I'm really excited about it. If you all are interested in more of it, I'm sharing a lot on social media. So you can follow me on Instagram. I think it's Arleene, ARLEENI 4 E's, or you could just type in Arleene Correa Valencia and I'm sure you'll find it. And one of the very last things I'll share is these dark paintings. I'm sorry that my desktop is so dirty. Or so messy. Like that's who I am. I'll show these paintings that I was creating previous to the shelter in place orders. And they're in my studio right now, but unfortunately I do not have access. And so I'll start by showing, this is the beginning of a new series that I hope to continue after this shelter in place order is lifted. But going back to the process of migration and the movement of the body, thinking about the elements, thinking about water and blue, and men again, and documenting the beginning of how I got to the United States. And so my migration began with my father coming over. And so this is the first painting of that history, right? Of honor, of telling that story of how I got here. I'll show you, okay. So this is how this painting started. Actually, it was like, this was my very rough sketch. And then I started filling in a little bit more. And so the way that I work is that I basically complete an entire, when I'm painting in oil, I basically complete the entire painting, and then I cover it up in these different colors to create the tones that I want. So bringing it back to the In Tiempos de Crisis, the Times of Crises series that talks about the Northern California fires, I was using the same techniques. I was painting the paintings and then I was covering them up with these cool and warm tones in order to be able to create temperatures. And so here I wanted to create these men that are in migration, and then cover them up, then remove their visibility, to give them a sense of protection. And so here I'm adding this red onto everything. And then after the red, I add on a blue. And so I completely cover the entire surface is removed. So everything that you saw previous is no longer there. I use a lot of walnut oil and I push the colors back and forth until I achieve essentially the layers that I want. And what I think is really wonderful about these paintings is, this is the finished product, but what I think is really great is that in photographs, they're really hard to see. They're almost like not there and they're almost invisible. But once you're up close to them, there's so much visibility that happens in looking at the layers of oil color that are going in and in and in. And so the depthness of the painting is really intriguing. And again, going back to the themes of visibility and invisibility and what is on the surface is really exciting. And so this painting, I think most successfully does that, and being able to translate the figure and what it's wearing and what it's holding and where it's going. A lot is told in the depths of this painting that are not visible on the surface. And so hopefully moving forward, this is what I'll be able to work on as soon as I can get access to my studio. And very quickly, in the back of my paintings, I'm again going back to this high vis yellow and the high vis orange, and using that to put another painting on the back of the painting. And so I'm using the frame as a second painting that tells more of a personal story of how I got here. And this is actually some of the text from a letter that my father and I exchanged before we all migrated over. And this is like a secretive hidden painting that I'm really excited about. And I'm really excited about its invisibility. When thinking about how this painting is displayed, this is suddenly like not there, will never be seen essentially. But it's a part of it that informs the painting in so many ways. And it's really personal, but it's really cathartic for me to be able to release a lot of this energy and of this history. Again, like I said, going to New York and coming out as undocumented was a huge release. And so every time that I get to like come out of my own story, it feels like I'm more of myself and like I'm embracing more of my history and who I am. So yeah, I'll leave you all with that. There's a lot more work that I could talk about forever, but I don't want to make this lecture too long. But I look forward to meeting all of you on the 23rd, and I look forward to having a conversation about how art can relate to your personal life or not, or whatever y'all might be, thinking or wondering. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me. I look forward to our conversation. Bye.